In 2017, China and Russia signed the last large-scale military trade contract to date. China purchased 24 of the most advanced Su-35 fighter jets from Russia, but nearly 10 years have passed, when it seems quite advanced Su-35 fighters in the Chinese Air Force is more and more embarrassing. Is currently thrown, or not, stay or not, is a piece of chicken ribs. As far as the country is concerned, Su-35 is undoubtedly a large number of Russian Air Force installed, the most outstanding performance of the twin-engine heavy fighter. Although Russia has begun mass production of more advanced Su-57 fighter, but by the limitations of the conditions, Su-57's production is too touching, coupled with the Russian-Ukrainian war and the attrition. So even into the 21st century, the Chinese Air Force is becoming more and more embarrassing. It is currently thrown, or not, stay or not, is a chicken ribs. So even into the third decade of the 21st century, Russia is still mass-producing Su-35 fighters to make up for the lack of the number and performance of their own fighters. However, this is still the Russian army, top pillar, of the heavy fighter, now in China, but the status of embarrassment. But all this has nothing to do with the Su-35, all because China's development speed is too fast. Many people think that the goal of China's procurement of Su-35 fighters in 2017 is to see the 117S engine of the aircraft, which is now often referred to as the L-41 vector engine. But in fact in 2017, China's Taihongbi type engine has basically matured, and the Russian vectoring technology is still stuck in the first generation of vectoring technology level, even if it is installed in the aircraft. Due to the vectoring nozzle length is large, heavy weight, and the operation is not sensitive enough, the aircraft maneuverability is not an improvement but an obstacle. There are two main considerations for the procurement of Su-35 fighters: balancing trade between China and Russia. In fact, since 2000, the trade between China and Russia has long been in the state of entering the super, because the collapse of the Soviet Union led to Russia's originally underdeveloped light industry even worse. So Russia can only manage to export oil, natural gas and other energy sources to the outside world, and then purchase a large number of manufactured goods from abroad for domestic consumption, which led to the trade between China and Russia long-term into the super. So by 2017 is really taught Russia and China to negotiate, through the export of fighter jets to China, slightly balanced the Sino-Russian trade. China agreed to purchase Su-35 fighter jets at that time. There were also two considerations. On the one hand, because the Su-35 was the most advanced double-engine heavy fighter in Russia at that time, technically than the previous Chinese procurement of Su-27SK and Su-30MKK fighters to be ahead of close to one generation. And the Russian fighter jets are the most advanced foreign fighters that China has access to. In the spirit of, in the attitude of three people, must be my teacher, China is determined to purchase a batch of them for the technical upgrading reference of China's own J-11 and J-16 fighters in the future. On the other hand, at that time, although China's Air Force already had advanced fighters such as the J-16 and the J-20, the number of them was limited after all, and these planes' own technical parameters were also highly confidential. So it was a simple matter to purchase a batch of Su-35 fighters, specifically for the Su-27SK and Su-30MKK fighters. A batch of Su-35 fighters are specially used for daily patrols and expulsion of foreign planes, so that the real combat power of J-16 and J-20 can be effectively preserved from being detected by the outside world. From a technical point of view, Su-35 fighter jets objectively have their own advantages. The aircraft applies the most advanced Russian aviation technology. In terms of avionics in Su-27SK, Su-30MKK compared with the Leapfrog Progress, the aircraft uses the Snow Leopard E type passive phased array radar, which has the ability to detect and lock the U.S. F-22 fighters in a distance of 170 kilometers. The aircraft uses the Snow Leopard E passive phased array radar, which has the ability to detect and lock the US F-22 fighter at a distance of 170 kilometers, and at the same time, due to the use of the 117S engine, the aircraft's normal takeoff thrust-to-weight ratio is as high as 1.53, and even higher in air combat. Even the J-10C fighter, which is famous for fighting, is difficult to take advantage of the Su-35 in a close-range fighting situation. This is probably the Su-35's biggest advantage over Chinese fighters. After the Russian-Ukrainian War, it is clear that Russia's fighter design ideas have great flaws, because Russian fighters are generally more in pursuit of agility and fighting ability. This is partly because Russia lacks advanced onboard avionics systems. It is difficult to construct the advantage of over-the-horizon air combat, and on the other hand is the Russian designers of the idea of the existence of a bias, always pursuing the aircraft's agility, relatively ignoring the impact of advanced electronic equipment. For the Russian designers have always pursued the agility of the aircraft, relatively ignoring the impact of advanced electronic equipment on air combat and such design thinking, so that the Russian Air Force in the Russian-Ukrainian War ate a big loss. In addition to the relatively old MiG-29, Su-24, Su-25 and other aircraft were a large number of downed. The most advanced, Su-35 fighters in the Russian-Ukrainian War at least also lost 5 units. The results of the Russian-Ukrainian War proved that over pursuing the agility of the fighters themselves and neglecting the role of electronic equipment can bring about the demise of the fighters. In particular, the Russian army, due to the lack of necessary precision-guided weapons, in order to ensure the accuracy of bombing using ordinary bombs, had to send advanced heavy fighters to implement the pro-air bombing at a low altitude of less than 3,000 meters, which is the main reason for the heavy loss of Russian aircraft. After its own 8 years of use, coupled with the Russian-Ukrainian war combat effect, let the PLA realize that the hands of the 24 Su-35 is now chicken ribs, because these fighters are still using the same Russian radar avionics and flight control system, cannot be compatible with their own combat systems, and does not have the ability to use a variety of advanced Chinese the ability to use China's various advanced guided weapons, but the aircraft supporting the Russian weapons and equipment has long been behind the PLA's various types of weapons, at least one generation, and even the Russian army for the Su-35, equipped with the latest weapons, but also significantly behind the PLA's current weapons, so there is no need to waste money from Russia to purchase related weapons to the Su-35, supporting the use of the aircraft. As of now, with the production of J-16 and J-20 more and more, especially J-35 fighters have also begun to put into mass production, the future of these 24 Su-35 fighters in China's Air Force will be more and more embarrassing. But the aircraft's airframe life of at least 20 years, but the aircraft has never been able to integrate into China's combat command system, so in the future a long period of time, the Su-35 fighters probably will just hang old Russian air-to-air missiles from China's stockpile, take on the simple tasks of daily patrols and expulsion of foreign planes, and continue to play a residual heat until its retirement.